Good afternoon. I'm Seafood Dave Charlesworth from Kajukenbo Napoli here in Naples, Italy. Tonight, got my co-host with me here, Seafood Steve Miller, and we've got our guest star here, Professor David Tavares. And we're going to be talking a little bit about the Walter Godin experience. Basically wanted to get out here and correct some information and share some of his life and some of his experiences. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and cut over to Professor Tavares.
Yeah, well, once again, thank you for giving me the opportunity to be on your podcast here. But before we get started, I want to make some corrections on the last podcast that we did. I made a few mistakes on. I want to keep the integrity and the accuracy of your podcast, intact. But the first one that you caught was Thomas Muir. I didn't say his name. I said William Sagalili's name twice, but you dubbed over that. And the second one was Shimabuku. The arresting officer was Francis Sakai, and his badge number was 295. I said it was 277. That was the badge number for Thomas Muir's arresting officer, Officer Burns. I didn't want everybody to think that the HPD officers back in the 50s all had the same badge numbers. That's not the case. There's just so much information, that I was trying to retain, and it was pretty hard for me. But also, I called Felipe Flores, Felipe Garcia. His name is Felipe Flores. He was the maintenance guy at the Pink Elephant.
I said, Joe didn't drive himself home, did he? Oh, that's not true. And I kind of fumbled that ball, but I double checked. I circled back around with you, sir, and you confirmed that indeed great Grandmaster Joseph Directo Emperado did drive himself home. So I would like to amend and correct that, please.
Professor Godin, my professor was born March 21st, 1937. And he was raised out in Kalihi Valley, a place called Richard Lane. Richard Lane is not a very good place where you want to have your kids grow up or your grandchildren grow up. It's a pretty rough place. Ed Parker was living in the Valley area, but not necessarily in Richard Lane where Professor Godin was. But they would see each other once in a while. Mr. Parker was a little older than Professor Godin. But anyways, his martial arts background, okay, his father knew Savat. His father's name was Leo Walter Godin, and Professor Godin was named Walter Leo. But anyways, the extent of the Savat training that he had, it wasn't made clear to me. I really don't care about that, but Professor had told me that when his father was teaching him Savat, he didn't see it as a martial arts because, out in the streets, the kicking is what every kid that grew up in the streets here in Hawaii, they called, kicking the guy when he was on the ground, they called it shoe job. So that's what he thought he was just teaching him. He was street fighting shoe job. And also, at 12 years old, he studied with Judo from a guy named Sensei Higami. And they called him the Rubber Man. But the extent of that training, I'm not sure. And that really doesn't matter to me. But I'll get into how it was that he got into Kajukenbo and why it is that he got into Kajukenbo. Before I do that, I got to explain to you that Professor Godin, when he was a kid, he went to a school called the Kamehameha Schools. It was a private school. It was a college prep school. He had a scholarship to go there because he has Hawaiian blood. And for those of your listeners that don't know what the Kamehameha Schools are, it was made by Princess Bernice Puahi Bishop. Her and her husband never had any kids, so she left this trust when she passed away for all the underprivileged Hawaiian kids with Hawaiian blood, that they would have to, if they qualified, that they could go to the school, and have the best education, the best meals, the best facilities, and all that. And he went there. And a lot of the kids, it's like now you got a lot of haters. They were jealous about that. So he really couldn't trust a lot of people, who were his friends or so-called friends. So every once in a while they would, they would gang up on him. They would mob him coming home from school, or just hanging out, just out in the neighborhood. So a lot of times he had to defend himself. One on one, he had no problem because he was a pretty big kid. But when they gang up on you, he had to pick up whatever it is that he had around him. Whether it was trash can lids or sticks or what they call alley apples, which is rocks. And so he always needed some kind of method of self defense he wanted to learn. And I'm not sure if he got enough of it through the training that he got from judo or sabat, but it ended up one day him and his friends, they went to this movie called Lightning Karate or something like that. Yeah, I'm not sure. He wasn't sure exactly what it was, but I guess he was in ninth grade. He was 15 years old, and he saw it, and he got caught in that romance of like, oh wow, I can fight just like that guy. Fighting off multiple attackers is what I need to, fight off all these guys. So he looked around, trying to find a karate school and everything, and somehow he was able to go to Palama, and he could never really get inside there. He would peek inside, but he would see the guys going in and then coming out after training. He would always hang around there, and hoping that one of the guys would talk to him, and nobody would really talk to him until one day Joe was lifting weights before class, and Charles Localo was spotting him the weights. And then Charles looked at Godin and said, "Hey, come here, help me put these weights on the bar." And Godin was like, "Wow, the guys are actually talking to me." So he went over there, he ran over there, he put the weights on. He goes, "Hey, you need anything else, And they go, "No." And then Joe was lifting the weights, and then after he said that, Joe told him like, "What are you doing around here? I see you hanging around all the time." He goes, "I want to be like you guys. I want to learn, karate. I want to train like you guys." And Joe just laughed. He goes, bullshit. You're going to get your ass kicked. You're going to run home to your mom. And Godin told him, "No, I'm not." He goes, "I'm not afraid." And so, Joe kind of looked at him and said, "Okay, I'll see what I can do." I don't know if it was that night or, the next night or whatever, like he said that when he came in, Joe let him in through the doors. And he said it was just, a new experience for him. And it was, he said, well, okay, he said it was, unless you experienced it, only then you'll understand what the training was like, and he explained to me later. But before I get into that, he told me, David, I never ever heard Sergio Adriano ever say, what's that saying that Sergio said? No, there's been no training unless there's blood on the floor, or blood on the walls, or something like that.
Yeah.
He says, I never heard him say that.
On the floor.
Yeah, that's a motto in Kajukenbo.
Professor Godin said, I never heard him say that, bro. He goes, I never heard him say that. He says, number one is he was hardly ever there. And he goes, also, he may have said it after I got kicked out, but he goes, I never heard him say it. He says, sure, there were guys bled and stuff like that. And, the training was hard. And, there was a lot of contact. The physical fitness was hard. And that's the thing that he explained to me, that unless you experience, you'll understand. And you could probably understand through the training that you guys got. He said, because for him, it was new. He was only 15 years old. And he said it was like a military, and it was also like a church. Because he said that, when he got inside there, the physical fitness was just so hard. The what they call 6 inches. They do endless 6 inches. They do push-ups. They do all those calisthenics, and then they would have to do all those basics in the squat. And he said it was like endless. They keep doing the same strikes, the same blocks. And he goes, you did it with all the hissing, and the fifth count. You had that loud ki that echoed in the building, and then on the 10th count, you tried to make that ki even louder than the one that you did on the 5th count. And he said, be so loud, the echo. And then he said it would just be as quiet as a church, because it'd be, because Joe would say like inhale, exhale, and he would say like breathe, close your eyes, and then open your eyes again, So you go from one extreme to the other, from uh, loud TIs to silent, and then when they would do the self defense, they have that animal instinct of just pounding the guy, just beating the shit out of each other. But he said that he never heard that that saying of the blood on the floor or on the walls or whatever. But he said that there was an understanding that when you went to train, you know, you were going to train hard. You're going to leave everything on the training hall floor, And the reason why you knew that is because those other guys were doing it. Joe and Marino was up in the front, and they were leading by example.
So,
So yes,
Professor,
yeah,
it was literally a spiritual experience.
yes, yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
That's what he took it as, is because it was a whole new life for him, and so that's why he said, unless you've experienced, only then you'll understand, and So I think you guys experienced in your training sessions and stuff. There was a hard contact, people were bleeding, but like I said, that for him, he never heard that saying, But yeah, but he's training with Joe. He said that after a while, him and Joe would go to secluded parks, and they would train self defense techniques that they wouldn't practice in class. He would tell Godin, okay, write this down or remember it. So the next time we train, and when we train out in the parks, we'll work on it again. And he told Professor Godin that he was going to go on his own, and he would take him with him. He didn't know when, but and then he told me this in like 99, 2000, and then he died in 2001. But when I interviewed Uncle Frank Ordonez when I was doing my book, I think it was 2015 or 2016. He was in my house, and Jason Groff brought him here, and he was talking about Joe. And for those of you listeners that don't know, Joe was like 19 years old, and he was the one that did what in MMA they call ground and pound. Okay, but that was Joe's idea. After the takedown, you keep striking and hitting the guy. So that was Joe Emperor Kajukenbo, back in '47. But anyways, Uncle Frank had mentioned that after Joe, got murdered, him, Uncle Frank, Marino Timonak, and Adriano Emperado, they all went down to HPD to go look in the jail cell to see Shimabuku. They wanted to see what he looked like. They went down there, they saw him in the jail cell, and he said Shimabuku had this real defiant smirk on his face, And he mentioned that, and after he mentioned that, he looks at me, he goes, Joe was gonna break away and go on his own, And I was like, wow, man, Professor Godin told me that like 15 years ago, and that it validated what, it confirmed what my professor said. So I believe, he
So
was
Uncle
gonna
Frank
go
told
out.
you that.
What's that?
So Uncle Frank told you that.
Uncle Frank confirmed it. I didn't
Ah,
even bring it up. He confirmed it. And whether
Could I
what
inter-
why he
could I
was gonna,
interject? Could I interject briefly?
yeah.
And you asked us, which I'm getting it now. You kind of made an implication or insinuation that you just want to put the receipts on the table and let people see it, which is perfect. And then we could carry on with stuff that might be hypothetical or theoretical in your absence with subsequent episodes. Correct, sir?
Yeah, sure.
In one of the follow-up episodes that we have coming up, will be with Professor Paul Raymond Buitron III. He is a
Oh
traveling
yeah,
man. He's a
yeah.
traveling man. He's a traveling man. He's been from east to west and west to east again, possibly military and active. It's going to be a treat. And there's already a Savat connection. He wants to talk about all things Kenpo. I have a mind-blowing hypothesis that I believe is partially substantiated. It will knock people's socks off, but Sifu Charlesworth and I have, thanks to you, Professor, done a really deep dive and dug up some gems along the way. And although a large portion may or may not be hypothetical, it should be considered and examined, because if one connects the dots, they may see the larger picture. And I do believe that a very elusive, enigmatic character was behind all of it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I'll be sure to tune into that. But yeah, it sounds like a good one. I can't wait to watch that. But anyways, of course, after the passing of Joe, he said that it was there. Of course, it'll always be different when someone that is really dear to you. It's never going to be the same. The memory, and the loss of the person, the pain is with you always. And but Professor Godin said that Kajukenbo for him, the training, it was different. Number one is because he felt that vibe that those guys were distancing himself from him. They wouldn't talk to him at times. They didn't treat him as. He felt that he had that vibe that he was an outcast because of what had happened, and the people had blamed him, and from what was in the newspaper, it said inside there that Godin broke free, ran away, and stuff like that. So everybody went with that narrative. But he says for him it was different, and there were some other things that was happening inside there. There was this CJ Adriano was starting to promote some guys, and that didn't bother Professor Godin. One of them in particular was a guy named Twinkle Kawakami, and I don't know. I'd never seen that guy. I heard of him, but I seen his picture once. There's a picture that I have of him and Uncle Frank and CJ Adriano together, but that's the only picture I ever seen of him. And what Professor Godin told me, what that guy was he held some kind of high status and a position in the state of Hawaii. And he promoted him, I don't know to what rank, but I found out later on from another Kajukenbo guy that Twinkles Kawakami, they named him as the bull in Kajukenbo because he did like Chinese boxing. So he replaced Great Grandmaster George Chang because they thought Great Grandmaster George Chang passed away in the Korean War, which they found out that he was still alive and well. Later on, when Peter Chu died, he showed up at the funeral. But anyways, yeah, Twinkles Kawakami played a big part in why my professor left. And I'll give you an example. One was I know for sure he did. I don't know how he felt about the other guys. I can only tell you how Godin, how he got along with him and how he didn't like Godin. Okay, there was this. It was an election year, and Twinkles wanted to campaign for this one politician. I don't know who it was, but he had asked Adriano if his Kaju guys can hold signs, and CJ Adriano said, yeah, so you got all these guys. They gave them all signs, and they were all, lined up on the sidewalk and everything. And Twinkles went up to, Godin and told him, like, hey, he said, Godin, go around the corner. That way they'll see you, and when they make that turn, they'll see all of us. And he was like, hey, fuck you. You go over there. I'm staying with the Kaju guys, bro. So he said, not even 30 seconds went by, David, and here comes Sonny. He comes up to me and says, Godin, go around the corner. I'll go hold the sign over there. So he's like, okay, yeah, shoot. And he told me, like, David, I took that fucking sign, I ripped it up, and I threw it on the ground. He goes, I would have gave anything to see, their face when they turned that corner and they saw that sign, broken and ripped up. So, that's one of the things that happened. There's another time that what broke the straw on the camel's back, or whatever the saying is, but it happened at a tournament. It was one of his students named Martin Buell fought Al Dela Cruz, and I'm not going to get into it, but that was that was the reason that they called a meeting. Twinkles asked, I don't have any proof, but Professor Godin says, I'm pretty sure that Twinkles was the one that told Adriano to hold a meeting, and they had it at his house. I'm not exactly sure who was there, but I know for sure that Mr. Kamahoa, Abraham Kamahoa was there, because he said that Mr. Kamahoa was the only one that spoke up for Godin. And, when Professor Godin was walking out, Brother Abe stopped him. He says, no, don't leave. He goes, stay here. I'm going to go talk to Sonny and make him change his mind. He goes, no, this is it, man. I want to get out of here. He goes, I don't want to be a part of this anymore. And he was like, you sure? No, come on, you got to stay in. Finally, he says, are you sure? He goes, yeah. So he left. And, that's how he got kicked out. And before I get into how we got into Karazempo, is there's been a lot of questions about my professor's rank. Okay, even Professor Godin had told me, like, David, Sergio Adriano, well, actually, he never called him Sergio Adriano. He called him Sonny, and he goes, he would always say I was a blue belt. When I left, he said I was a blue belt. And I saw his certificate hanging on the wall in the hall that he had at his house. And that didn't, that shit didn't matter to me. I mean, really, he even had the Professor Charles certificate, but none of that shit, it matters to me because of his contributions and the level of his martial arts is what. But there's a picture inside Black Robe that Uncle Frank Ordonez gave to Delilah, and it's in his handwriting. That they're right there. That's Uncle Frank's handwriting right there. That Walter Godin is receiving his black belt. Okay, and you count the stars on the American flag there, and how many, so you can guess what year. And look at how all those guys' heads are down. They're not going to do that for a color belt, in my opinion. But it's in black and white. But that's Uncle Frank's writing. If you want to dispute Uncle Frank being promoted to black belt, it's up to you. I don't care. Like I said, I don't. Everybody's so concerned about rank, where he got it from, and how he went up to the ranks. But
Professor,
yeah,
as a longtime student of Kosho Shorei Ryu Kenpo,
yeah,
and also head of the West Windward Division of Kogaha Kosho Shorei Ryu Kenpo, I recognize a highly distinctive pattern in the seating positions of all officers present. There are 3 seated in a triune form in black gis. This is not a color belt promotion.
God, thank you for putting that out, because when that was on Kajukenbo Cafe, this thing was discussed on there. One of the guys there said, we don't know because it's in black and white. And I was like, like I said, people will interpret the truth their own way, and it doesn't matter to me. It's a contribution, and what you your legacy of what you left behind. But anyways, I'm not gonna talk about that anymore. You guys, your listeners or viewers can make their own decision on what they think, what rank he was. But so in 1960 is when he separated himself from Kajukenbo, and Uncle Sonny Gascon was going to open a school in California, in Burbank area. So Professor Godin went up there to go help him get it established in 1960, and they were using the name Kajukenbo as the method of self-defense. And Sergio Adriano heard about that, got wind of it, and he sent some guys over to the school. And I know bits and pieces of it, to get the correct accuracy of the experience of what happened, you'd have to talk to Bruce Corrigan, because Bruce Corrigan is the Karazempo guy. He's the highest ranking Karazempo guy on the planet. Okay, he trained with both Uncle Sonny, and later on he went under Professor Godin, and you can find out later from him if you ever talk to him. But it was in 1960. So they sent these guys in to tell them that what Adriano said, that you can't use Kajukenbo as your method of self-defense. So they got angry. They saw that as a challenge, and they were pissed off. And the guys were saying like, hey, we're just sending, we're just delivering the message, So they were more mad and, disappointed that, Sergio Adriano didn't call them, directly and tell them, and ask them or tell them or whatever. So they called them and they decided that, no, we're not gonna pay you anything, because he wanted money if they were going to use the name Kajukenbo as a self-defense, which, I can understand and stuff, but they made a decision that, no, we're not going to do that. So they decided on a name. I'm not sure if they did it together or Uncle Sonny did it or Professor Godin, but it was called Karazempo, and that means empty mind. But there you go. There's thank you. Yeah, that's when they got it there. But it's empty mind, and if you can show the patch of the Karazempo patch from 1960, if you have that picture. But anyways, it's a picture of Daruma, and they used it for Karazempo, the first patch, and he also used it when he came back to the States. He used it as for Kenpo karate. But anyways, because Professor Godin was really intrigued by Priest Daruma. So if you ever look at artifacts of Priest Daruma, I'm sorry I'm going deep into this, but I got to explain the reason why, the name of Karazempo.
Here's the patch I believe you're talking about.
Yeah, there's Daruma there. Okay. Now, if you see any artifacts or any art portraits of Daruma, he has what people think is an empty teacup, but it represents a cup of knowledge, and it's saying anytime your cup of knowledge is full, you empty it out, and so you keep learning. It's an endless process, so that's what they meant by empty your mind, and I was really surprised, and I was interested that Bruce Lee used that in his when he was on Long Street. He did a quote on empty your mind, be formless, be shapeless, So I was thinking, like, God, if he got that from them, But,
Professor?
Yes.
Daruma is also Bodhidharma. He sat under a tree with a cobra over his head. And that little Buddha on that patch is clearly knitting his hands together in a mudra.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you look at that Karazempo patch, that's from 1960, okay? To the left of Daruma on Karazempo, that's Uncle Sonny's name in the kanji there. And to the right of it is Professor Godin's name. And then we'll get into another patch that looks something like that later. But anyways, Chief Instructor Steve Miller on one of his social media sites, it had Mr. Jutnik interviewing Sijo and Mike Young, I believe. And then Sijo, he criticized the name of Karazempo. He said empty mind, so that means you got nothing in your head or anything like that. But he misinterpreted it or misunderstood the meaning. Is empty your mind, anytime your mind is full, you empty a cup of knowledge, and that's what it was. And we criticized them, but that was the meaning behind the name Karazempo. And in 61, when the school was, after the school was established, Professor Godin went back in 1961 back to Hawaii. He missed his family, and he decided he wanted to open up a school, and he gave the Karazempo to Uncle Sonny, and so he decided that he knew he couldn't use Kajukenbo anymore, So he talked to Professor Chow, okay, because he had a lot of respect for Professor Chow because Professor Chow was, his instructor, Joe's instructor. And I know a lot of young kids up in the mainland, they really show a lot of disrespect to Professor Chow, because of the self-promotion stuff. But they got to understand, I mean, when you grew up when I did, when Professor Chow was alive and you're a Kenpo man, and they looked at Professor Chow, just like how the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioners in Brazil, the way they see Grandmaster Helio Gracie is the same way that they revere Professor Chow. He was very well respected, by everybody. Everybody. I mean, nobody called him out on his so-called self-promotion or anything, not even Bobby Lowe, nobody. You know, but anyways, he talked to Professor Chow. He told him that he wanted to use the name Kenpo, and if it was all right and he had his blessings. Excuse me, Professor Chow told him, yeah, no problem, it's not a problem at all. So he used the name Kenpo Karate, Kenpo with the N. And then later in 1973, Professor Chow told him, change it to the M, Kenpo with the M. We call it Chinese Kenpo. And Professor Godin told me the reason why he did that is because at that time, he wanted to separate him. Professor Chow wanted to separate himself from Professor Mitosi because I'm not sure what year that Chief Instructor Steve Miller, he would probably know this, what year that Professor Mitosi got in trouble, but I think that's the reason why he wanted to separate himself from that. So that was in
May I
1970.
interject? Could I interject for
Yeah.
1 second?
Yeah.
I don't recall, sir, the date or the year or anything, but what I do know is the linguistic variable, the changing of an M or an N. And
Yeah.
to illustrate that, it's in the Japanese language, and it's not anything that could show up in writing. But
Yeah.
when you combine and you conjugate or whatever, and you take these things and you form. So the word Kenpo is law of the fist, but when you put it together, it goes Kenpo. And so the word Ninpo, way of endurance, is also Nimpo. And so it's not something that is derived from the kanji. It is an Americanization. All of these coat of arms are Americanized codes that are actually, I believe these things were intentionally set up, and I believe that you don't even know why you have it so strongly and indelibly etched upon your heart, Professor, that this patch is so significant and that it does matter. Just like my patch, these gentlemen were chief instructors, etc. And you can call me Chief Boja all day long, but this patch was designed, mine personally was designed by me, scribbled on an envelope. I took a picture, said to Ed Parker Jr., hey, brother, could you whip me up a nice computer generated logo that I can use for patches, t-shirts, business cards, letterhead, internet, you name it. And Ed Jr. goes, yeah, sure, no problem. And I will refer to him as EPJ, Ed Parker Jr. And anyway, I love that man, and I love his wife, and they're great people. They've really been so gracious and generous to me over the years, and I do love and adore them. I treasure them. They are jewels, and they're very happy in Sumter, Oregon. He's actually, Ed Jr. is working on Paxual martial arts, which is, instead of martial, it's Paxual. He is reuniting things. And right now, Kajukenbo, it was fractured, and I really love how you have poured out your heart, Professor, because it was fractured, but I believe it was intentional, and that there was a highly intelligent operative behind all of this. But that's neither here nor there at this point, and I do not mean to digress, sir.
Yeah, no sweat, man. Yeah, thanks for that. But yeah, but anyways, getting back to the car example, if I can go back again, Dave, there's two different car example patches. This is just for information for all the Kajukenbo guys, so they know everything about the art, the history, and the car example patches that you see here. Okay, the one on the left is, like I said, the original one from 1960, and then the kanji on Daruma there on the left is Uncle Sonny's name, and then to the right, the Kaji on the right is Professor Godin's name. Okay. Now this horizontal patch on the right here, okay, that Uncle Sonny had changed it. Okay, that's his name to the left, but to the right is a guy named Mike Rash, and Bruce Corrigan was training with Uncle Sonny at the time, and he was senior to Mike Rash, and Bruce wasn't gonna have it, wearing that patch there to a guy who's junior to him, so Bruce left, and he stuck with the old original Carazempo,
Good.
to the one that's on the left there. So the
Good.
one on the right there is Carazempo, but that was under that's not the original. Yeah.
Okay. Can I briefly interject, please, sir?
Yeah, great.
You have done a very outstanding job of decoding the coat of arms, and decode as in deconstruct, and it is a coat of arms or crest. Now, Mitose started out with black and white. What I see on the original Carazempo patch are 3 pillars. It is black, red, and white. The 3 pillars in the center are placed in an equilateral configuration. Bodhidharma is the largest. The 2 gentlemen represented by kanji are almost of equal stature and certainly not disproportionate as in the incorrect patch, sir.
Mm-hmm.
Over.
Thank you for that, man. Yeah, so he did all these teachings. It was at the Kamuki. He started his school in 1961 in Kamuki. That's the place where Eugene Cedeno started his training at in 1962. And later on, he would open it up at 404 Pikoi, which is the headquarters branch. That was the training area where John Hackelman started his training at. I trained up in the Pacific Palisades area, which was run by a guy named Martin Buell, who was a very good martial artist. And yeah, so there was, Professor Godin, he really contributed a lot, to the martial arts community. He threw tournaments. He even threw a full contact tournament. I think it was 1977 was the first one he threw. It was at Blaisdell Arena. And it's something new because during that whole time of the full contact fighting, they used to use the old June Ree type equipment, the same that they used in the point fighting. So that was, in Professor Godin's tournament that he threw in 1977 at Blaisdell Arena, the fight guard that he put, there was the first time that they used the Reyes gloves here in Hawaii, and they also had the safety kit was Reyes boxing equipment company. They made it especially for full contact fighting for the kickers. It was like a slide on boot, almost looked like a snow boot. It was yeah. So what he did, he one of the pioneers, and I think Mr. Charlesworth has the news clipping on that tournament. That was they're right there, and you can see inside there that John Hackelman, he fought on that same card, and then so he contributed to the martial arts community, okay, and he wasn't just a street thug like a lot of people thought. He did demonstrations out at all over the island. Some pretty unforgettable ones. I'm not going to get into that, but they were really good. But also, he got into some trouble later on. This part of his life, I'll talk about it. He got in trouble for cocaine, distribution of cocaine. I was just telling Mr. Charlesworth there off camera there that he actually faced 120 years, but it ended up He got 10. He served 7.5 years. There it is there. Thank you very much for that. You know, he did 7.5 years and he got out in, I believe it was in 1988. And then I saw him in 1989 and he flew up to Maui with us for it was the first Ted Tubura tournament that he threw. It was called Festival of the Kings. Okay. And he went up there with us. And well, it was real strange because seeing that tournament I fought, I took the lightweight division. For the grand championships, I ended up losing to a guy named, his last name was Jasko. He was from Germany. That was one of Aldi Costco's fighters, you know. And the trophies that Ted Tubura gave that year was the first year, and they were big. I mean, it wasn't the hard ones, like, you know, it was still the cheap shit plastic ones, but they were just tall. So you had to carry it on the aircraft, okay? So when we were at the airport out in Kahului, you know, I had the trophy next to me, and this one guy comes over, and he goes, "Hey, you guys martial arts?" And you go, "Oh, yeah, we had a tournament down here. We're going back to Oahu, you know." And he goes, "Hey, man, whatever happened to that Godin guy?" And he goes, "Oh, he'll be right back. You know, he just went to the bathroom." And you go, "How do you know Professor Godin?" He goes, "Oh, I used to train with him out in 4-4 Pequot." So Professor Godin, you know, when he came back and, you know, he was talking to the guy and stuff like that. And he said, "Do you remember that guy?" He goes, "Yeah, I remember that guy." But there were some other times that, you know, one that was real funny was we was at a Christmas party. We got invited to a martial arts Christmas party. It was the Lima Lama guys. And these people stopped him and they go, "Are you Professor Godin?" He goes, "Yeah." He goes, "Oh, well, we're so and so, and you know, you used to come over every once in a while and teach martial arts, you know, to the her cousin and stuff like that." He goes, "Oh, wow, how you doing? You know, how's your cousin doing?" Everything like that. So they started talking and they came back and Delilah asked him, "Can you remember those guys?" He goes, "No, I don't remember them at all." You know, so a lot of the people he saw, you know, and he said, "Man, I got no idea. You know, I met so many people I can't even remember them." But that one guy he remembered. He said because you know that guy was he was a good fighter and stuff like that. But you know, so I kind of thought to myself, you know, it kind of haunted me a little bit. I was thinking like, geez, I didn't see because I didn't train at his branch, but you know, I trained at another branch, and I was just a little kid, you know, and you know, he said he remembered me and stuff, but it kind of haunted me. I was thinking like, geez, I wonder if that guy really remembers me, you know, because I wasn't one of the champions like Billy and Jonathan Vance and a guy named Victor Raposa and John Hackleman, you know. I was just another kid who just trained the martial arts and stuff like that. But you know, I never did want to ask him, you know, because I was thinking, man, you know, I don't want to hear that. I don't think I'm ready for the answer. But yeah, you know, he just met a lot of people, and you know, he told me that I asked him, you know, you got any regrets or anything? He goes, no, not at all, because you know, it made me the man of who I am, and I just met so many people, you know, through the martial arts, and you know, through that party life too. You know, he just met some crazy people, you know, and I wouldn't say crazy, but he had a really good time. He was a man of his time. He loved the experience that he went through, you know, and he faced the penalty what he had to for what he did. You know, he faced it, and he served his time. And I even asked him, you know, when I did the interview with him, I said, you know, how would you like to be remembered? And he told me, you know, he kind of laughed. He goes, you know, if you ask 100 people what they remember about me, you're going to get 100 different answers. And he said, the majority of it is going to be about the martial arts. He goes, but you know what? It's not the martial arts I want to be remembered for. He says, I want to be remembered for how I turned my life around, how I surrendered my life to God, how I stayed drug free, and how I never went back to prison. He says, that's how I want to be remembered. And the thing was what I learned that
Hey,
he stopped.
let's cue up that Leonard Skinner, boys.
Yeah.
Free bird, baby, free
Free
bird.
bird, yeah. And that's what, when he broke away from, when he got kicked out of Kajukenbo, that's what he felt like. He said he's free. He said it was a burden off of him. He felt, it was his freedom. And that was real important to him too, that he lived the last 11 years of his life as a free man. And when he got into prison, he said there was as much drugs behind the fence as there was outside of the fence. And he said, but I didn't take any drugs. He stopped doing cocaine when his sentence started, and he stayed away from cocaine. And even when he got out, there were people that trying to get back in touch with him. And the first thing he asked him was, "Are you still doing cocaine?" And they said, "Yeah." And they said, "Well, I can't get near you because I don't want to be around it. If I'm around it, I'm going to do it again." And he goes, "There's no way I'm going to do that again and put my family through that and go back to prison." He goes, "No." So he stayed away from that. Like I say, didn't drink, didn't smoke, nothing.
Sounds like a rebirth. Sounds like he was reborn.
He did. He was, and that's a lot of things. He had that inner strength.
And one more word, please, sir. That is called theosis. Theosis. Theos is. Theos is. God is. I believe he achieved union with God.
That's the thing. He said a lot of times, all the time. In fact, he said he was behind bars. He did a lot of. I asked him how he had the strength to go through all that, and he says a lot of prayer, a lot of meditation, and he endured all that, and he overcame it. And I was really proud of that. See, there's a lot of people, they're going to say a lot of shit like, he didn't train, at the 4-4 Koi branch, the headquarters. There's two phases of Professor Godin that I knew. Two phases. When I was a kid, I saw him as this, big, invincible guy, and then the second phase was when I was an adult. And I, from the mid 90s till the day he died, about 6 years, I got to know him as, this guy who was a human being, and who made mistakes, and he wasn't perfect, like none of us are, but he was still doing the best that he could, with what he had, restarting a school again in Palama. That was one of his passions. He did it, I mean, he loved Palama. He was proud of his roots with Joe. His instructor. He called Joe the approaching storm. He says the storm before it hits, it generates power. Okay, he says that was Joe, and then when he hit, when the storm hit, it leaves devastation. And he says that's what Joe was, man. He goes, when he hit you, you hurt internally, you feel that pain, but it just hurts. And the guy was only 5'5", and according to the coroner's report, he was approximately 150 pounds. But he said that guy could, when he struck, man, he says it was like being hit by a car, man. So he was proud of that, and he acknowledged Cedro Adriano's request of not using the name Kajukenbo, and I'm going to do that too. I consider myself a Chinese Kenpo guy because, I'm going to honor that request that Professor Godin did, and what Uncle Sonny did. He honored that request, and he stayed Kajukenbo. I'm going to stay true to Chinese Kenpo, what I was taught and what I knew as a kid, there was some. Just before he got incarcerated, I know I'm skipping around. I apologize for that, but I'm trying to cover everything in a certain amount of time. But Martin Buell, my instructor, Professor Godin, he promoted him to 10th degree because they felt that he's going to be locked up a long time. And Professor Godin, yeah, there it is, right there. He's getting his rank right there. Is Professor Godin, and his Martin Buell later to become Professor Martin Buell. And then there's Jonathan Vance, to his to Martin Buell's left. But inside the Universal Kenpo Karate Schools Association, inside the Wikipedia, it shows that it states that Mr. Buell, Professor Buell, they call him Grandmaster now, Grandmaster Buell. He was his board of advisors or directors promoted him to 10th degree. But this picture here I got from Island Kajukenbo on Facebook, and there's a lot of other pictures from that promotion. So, like I said, Professor Godin, he had a bad rap, a bad name in Kajukenbo. They scrubbed him, and I don't want him to be scrubbed from Kajukenbo history or from Kenpo history. It's not right. He was, like I said, he was a good man. He had a good heart. He loved his family. He loved the art that he was doing. And Eugene Cedeno used to tell me when he used to go to the mainland, and see all those Kajukenbo guys. I thought he was going up there to give his grandson, that national tournament experience, fighting in the mainland, stuff like that, and competing in the mainland. But that was part of it. But Eugene had told me that he liked being around those Kajukenbo guys, and in fact, Eugene gave me a DVD of Godin doing a kata, because there was Joe Hope, there was Peter Chu, there was Uncle Frank, and there was Cedro Adriano. And Professor Godin did a kata for them. Okay, he entered the division, but he did not. If I have it, Eugene Cedeno has it. Eugene Cedeno, excuse me, has it. Now, Professor Godin did not face the judges when he did this kata. He was looking at the table where all those founders were, and he said what he was going to do. He did the kata for them. He didn't care about any trophy or anything like that, but he did it for them, for the Polama, for his roots of Polama, for the co-founders who are still alive, who were there, and it was for them. And that is living Chinese Kenpo, and that is living Kajukenbo. And that's what Professor Godin taught me. You gotta live the martial arts. Okay, you can't just wear the black belt like a Hollywood prop. You only wear it, when you're teaching, and you're not a martial artist anymore when you take it off. No, you gotta live it every day. You gotta get up and do the things that you gotta do as a martial artist. You gotta take care of yourself. You gotta practice the techniques, no matter how tired you are or how busy of a day that you have. You got to fit it in, no matter how bad your body's hurting or whatever. You got to fit it into your day or your life.
Like the Mona Lisa, body language is important. What I see in this photograph is Great Grandmaster Walter Godin is absolutely intentional in his pose, his demeanor, his focus, where he puts his hand. I see Uncle Frank is very happy to have unified these people. George came out of obligation to show that the fracture should never have happened. Mr. Hulk looks like he's super happy as a clam. And Joe's just happy to be in front of the camera. That's what I'm observing right here, gentlemen, in that photograph.
Yeah, those. I had that DVD, and it was, that thing touched my heart and everything like that. That he did that for those guys.
So, and I don't know if you want to talk anything about that video clip that you had shared with me, or if we want to just leave that.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I wanted to put that inside there because I do have the DVD, and I burned a copy, I believe, for Jason Gropp. I think I did. I'm not sure, but Eugene, he gave me that, and you guys. It's unreal, man. It was what he did is he faced towards them, he bowed to them, and he said, "This is what I'm going to." It was Kenpo Kata number 3, and he did Kenpo Kata number 9. And the thing of it was I forgot Kenpo Kata number 9, but when I saw it, I go, "That's Kenpo Kata number 9, man." I forgot it, so when I seen him do it, then I remembered it, and so now I know Kenpo Kata number 9. But Eugene had told me. Because Eugene was the guy that videoed it, and Eugene said, those guys that were the judges. He said they had no clue who he was. They didn't know who he was. That that he was the guy with Joe the night that. And yeah, so like I said, he didn't do it for a trophy or anything. He did it in respect to those guys, and that that's something to me. That meant something to me. So that's living, like I said, as a martial artist, but
So I know that there's been a lot of consternation and a lot of talk about Godin and his stature in Kajukenbo and his standing in Kajukenbo. In fact, I know you did another interview with uh, Angelo on his podcast, and then I know that you and I had discussed another clip that you had sent me that was discussing uh, Godin's positioning within Kajukenbo. And I know you wanted to talk about that. So I want to go ahead and just pull that clip up right here and let it play, and then you can talk about it and make any commenting that you wanted to share.
I think the pit is a great example, and that's why I love talking to Hackelman, because his approach is super radical. And by the time this podcast came out, the Godin method will be up, and you'll understand why Hackelman has such a radical approach to his Kajukenbo. And it's because Godin, he branched off. And Godin's not the only one who did this, by the way. A lot of guys would kind of branch off for whatever reason, and I don't want to go into a long historical thing. We're trying to finish this up quickly. But guys would branch off and then come back, right? They'd branch off, they'd go do their own thing. Maybe they get kicked out. Maybe they'd piss someone off, and then they'd get forgiven. Or maybe they would never got forgiven. Like in Godin's case, he got forgiven after he died. So like,
that was largely because of that book, right? Black Robe.
No, it wasn't. He got forgiven because of Hackelman's accomplishments, pretty much. Like to put it in a nutshell, Hackelman was had Chuck Liddell, was accomplishing a lot in the martial arts world, and so Cizio brought him back. Like I said, I don't want this to be a historical podcast, but I'm trying to keep it like real broad for anybody listening. Yeah, Chuck Liddell is a Kajukenbo guy. His branch is a Kajukenbo school, but they branched off before Chuck Liddell was even Chuck Liddell, and then they came back after Chuck Liddell was Chuck Liddell because the higher ups felt that it would be good for Kajukenbo.
Okay, so that was the clip of Angela doing a video with John Hoyo that you had sent me. And I know you wanted to talk about that, some of the things that might have been said in there, or some of your feelings about what they said.
So, yeah, what Angelo was talking about there was in 2004. What happened was John Hackelman, he got inducted into the Kajukenbo Hall of Fame, and as instructor of the year, and Chuck Liddell got inducted for Fighter of the Year, and then they gave Professor Godin an award for Instructor of the Year. Even though he had already passed away already, and excuse me. Anyways, John had called me and he told me about that. And I was real proud of John because of where he took his level of Hawaiian Kenpo. That I told him that all the guys here in Hawaii, the Kenpo guys here in Hawaii, from the Godin lineage, that we're real proud of what he did with his Hawaiian Kenpo. So I said, I'm going to go up there and I want to support you. So I went up there and I flew up there. But at the same time, I was thinking to myself, he got kicked out of Kajukenbo back in 1960. And I was thinking, like, man, I got a feeling that they're bringing him back. They're recognizing him as a Kajukenbo guy because of the success that John Hackelman and his fighters had, in the UFC, and they're making a big name. But I was just thinking, but I didn't really say it out loud. I didn't say it to John, but I just wanted there to support him, and that was the award that they gave him back in 2004. But John Hackelman ended up doing an interview with Angelo. It was before that clip that you sent me there, and he verified. He says, "Yeah, I think it was because of the success that he got in the UFC." Now, that was John's feeling. That was my feeling. And then Angelo had said there that I guess the board of advisors or the higher ups thought it was a good idea for Kajukenbo, to do that. So, if they did do that, that's something that, that's the decision that they made. But for me, what I say is, they should have acknowledged him while he was alive. It's just that old saying that, you like my mom says, give me the flowers while I'm alive so I can smell the fragrance and, enjoy the beauty of the flowers. They should have gave him, that award before then, but if they did that, with forgiveness and everything, like, acknowledging Professor Godin for all his accomplishments that he did and, the lives that he touched in the martial arts, that's a good thing. But if they did that to glorify themselves in Kajukenbo, then that's something that only they know, and then I'm going to say it out loud because I don't belong to any organization. I don't answer to nobody. That's my feeling. I could be wrong. If you got anything to say to me, you can find me at fightingarts@msn.com.
And I think that prior to, I don't want to say prior to that happening because this happened a long time ago, but I know that in some of the content that I've seen that talking with John Hackelman and things like that, and the reason why he called himself Hawaiian Kenpo was because he felt that he had kind of changed what he was teaching from what he learned from Godin. He took a lot of the tricks out, a lot of the grab arts out, and just kind of stayed with the principles and was teaching more towards the fighters for the UFC and things like that. And so he didn't feel comfortable calling himself Kajukenbo. And then once Chuck Liddell did hit the championship, and then followed by Glover Teixeira, I think that they brought them back into Kajukenbo prior to Glover, but it was, following.
Yeah, 2004 is what I remember them bringing him back in, for that. But yeah, you're correct, John. He even called Professor Godin and told him that he was going to call it Hawaiian Kenpo, and he had the blessings of Professor Godin. I think he called him when Professor was still locked up. And that's another thing John did that was really good, of him. And I realized that John called him a lot while he was, Professor Godin was in prison. The only one that really went to go visit him in while he was in prison was his daughter Delilah, and other than that, nobody else really did. John was already in the army, and he already established, had started a school already, so he wasn't here to come down and see him and everything. But John still stayed close to Professor Godin, and Professor Godin, I believe, you guys, that he knew he was going to pass away because he told me in 1999 he called all the black belts together, and he says, I'm going to promote John Hackelman and Bill Takeuchi. Billy Takeuchi was he trained at the branch that I did up in Palisades and Pearl City. He was under Martin Buell, but he had broken away from Martin Buell. Excuse me. But anyways, he said, I'm going to promote Billy because, I know Billy will never be promoted to 10th from Martin Buell. So he goes, I'm going to acknowledge Billy, for all his talents and skills and his contribution to the arts. Whereas John was my student, I'm going to promote him to 10th degree. So that was back in 2000 at the Miramar Hotel. And I forget what month it was, but, August 7th, 2001, Professor Godin passed away. It was a Tuesday. It was the day that I was supposed to teach a class, and I canceled class that day. Yeah. But thanks for bringing that up, and that's my analysis of that clip. I'm glad that you showed it. It's nothing that nothing against those guys, but I'm just acknowledging what it was that they said, and that's what I believe.
Okay.
Like I said, they if they want to dispute it, they can email me, and I can give you my phone number, and then you guys can talk it, discuss it intelligently with me. Whoever wants to dispute whatever it is that I said from this podcast, and including the last. But I want to thank you guys for the opportunity and the freedom and the liberty to say what it was that I wanted to say about my instructor. That's a very good picture, a beautiful picture right there. That's three generations. Which the thing of it is we got this thing called the Kenpo Sons of Oahu here on the island. It's not an organization. There's no dues or nothing. It's just a brotherhood that we have out here that comes from the Joe Emperado lineage, the Godin lineage. We're proud of our Kenpo lineage, and we try to uphold it with excellence. We stay out of each other's business. We don't go to anybody's school or have a board of directors that believe this is where Joe or Walter Godin wanted Kenpo to go. No, we do our own thing. We train. Some guys train the old school way. Some guys they train the MMA way. We train. We do what we do. When there's Christmas parties and stuff like that, we invite the other schools over to come. Out of the brotherhood, to come and be a special guest of honor. And we even have guys that like from Advanced Kenpo Karate, George Visola and Frank Rebello. They invite us to come over and see their guys getting promoted and stuff like that. So it's a good thing. Like I said, it's just a brotherhood. It's no organization, and we're there to acknowledge and honor the legacy of great Grandmaster Joe and Professor Godin. And yeah, and once again, thank you very much for all of this, and I wish you guys the best of luck. And before I go, press the like button on this podcast. If you don't like it, press the thumbs down button twice. And anyways, I subscribe to this channel, but is there anything that you guys that we can look forward to in 2026, the podcast that you got coming up, or trying to come up, or are you going to hold off until next year and let everybody know?
Well, I think that we've probably got some stuff cooking and things like that. I know that there's been a lot of discussion amongst myself and Sifu Steve there, talking about some future podcast episodes and some theories and things that we'd kind of like to explore a little bit. But I think it's important too that we recognize these people, and there are several people throughout the history of Kajukenbo that have come and gone, and some have gone and came back, and some did not, and some came back after death, as in the case here with Godin. Unfortunately, that some of this didn't happen while he was alive, but there's a lot of people out there that have had some issues and had fallen from graces, so to speak, as far as Kajukenbo is concerned. And that doesn't mean they're bad people, and that doesn't mean they're not Kajukenbo, And I think it's important that we recognize that and recognize that nobody's perfect, and we're all human, we're all fallible, we all have our issues, and there's a lot more issues that that have happened throughout Kajukenbo that we won't get into in this podcast. But there's a lot of people out there that, in fact, one of my old instructors has had his own issues and his own demons, but that doesn't mean he wasn't one of the greatest Kajukenbo guys that I've ever met in my life. So shout out to Sifu Sid Lopez, if you're watching. I really appreciate what you did for me when I was a young child, and we all have our issues, so let's keep that in mind when we talk about people, and we shouldn't be out here just trying to trash talk people when they don't deserve that. So I don't know if you guys have any parting thoughts. Go ahead and open that up.
Yeah. What you just said, it reminded me, when you're talking about Grandmaster Sid Lopez there, Godin, he really loved that saying, In fact, Chief Instructor Steve Miller there, he's wearing that shirt. It says, to fall 7 times, you must rise 8. A lot of people, they don't understand that, the thinking behind that is in life, it seems that we're overwhelmed with a lot of things. We have fallen more times than we really have, but it's It's the resilience in us that we got to get back up. You fall, there's only one way to go, is get back up and get back in the game, and turn your life around, just like Professor Godin did, man. He inspired me, and I got my issues too. Everybody, we like you said, man, we all got our issues, man. Nobody's perfect.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I think it's really what it comes down to is what really matters in life is not always how many times you've failed and how miserable you can get, but it's who you turn to when you're in need, kind of thing. And when you get to that low point in your life, who do you turn to? Myself, I believe in Jesus, and he's who I turn to. So
Amen.
there you have it. Steve, you got anything you want to say?
Would love to, but I can't see my face to point the camera and close while it's opened up properly. And you have your screen sharing on, sir.
Oh, well, let me take the screen share off.
And then I guess you can crop things too. Well, in Japanese, I learned from Uncle Larry Kraxberger and Hanshi Bruce Juknick a phrase, Nana karobi yauke jinsei wa kore karada. Fall 7, rise 8, life begins now.
All right.
Aloha.
Well, appreciate y'all coming out. Big salute to y'all. Mahalo. And
Merry Christmas. Happy New Year.
Merry Christmas to everybody.